Evening, everyone. The April 30th, 2024 meeting of the Ways and Means Committee will now come to order. Will the clerk please read the roll?
Ms. Barnhart. Ms. Barnhart is present. Mr. Baines. Mr. Baines is present. Ms. Bartholomew McCoy. Ms. Bartholomew McCoy is present. Mr. Brew. Mr. Brew is present. Mr. Colby. Mr. Colby is present. Mr. Dondorfer. Mr. Dondorfer is present. Mr. Keller. Mr. Keller is present. Chairman Mafucci.
Here.
Chairman Mafucci is present. Ms. Smith. Ms. Smith is present. Ms. Vasquez Simmons. Ms. Vasquez Simmons is present. And Mr. Udelson. Mr. Udelson is present. President Rahman. President Rahman is present.
Legislators, will you please stand as Legislator Colby will now lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, Legislator Colby. Are there any speakers signed up for the public forum?
There is not.
Is there anyone present who would like to speak? Okay, the next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. You have the minutes from the March 26, 2024 meeting before you. They will stand approved unless the clerk is notified of any changes by the end of the day. The next item on the agenda is new business. Mr. Clerk.
The agenda items as one with the exception of the following: numbers 133, 135, 137, 138, and 143.
Moved by Legislator Udelson, seconded by Legislator Smith. Is there any discussion? Right ahead. You can have a moment.
For discussion.
We can just, there's no need to amend it.
Edit, Legislator Baines.
Also 0134.
Thank you.
Also 0136.
Any others?
No, thank you.
All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Item.
So we should be on referral 24-0132. Acceptance of a grant from the New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services for criminal justice discovery reform funding for the District Attorney's Office and the Department of Public Safety, Office of Probation and Community Corrections.
Moved by Legislator Baines, seconded by Legislator Dondorfer. Is there any discussion?
Through you, Mr. Chairman of the Administration, can representatives of the District Attorney's Office and the Department of Public Safety, Office of Probation and Community Corrections inform us as to whether the grant which we are about to accept is meeting the needs for its purpose, which is to address criminal justice, discovery, reform funding, and how we are proceeding under that new mandate and whether or not we were able to meet it. Basically, I'm asking for a report of the status of our efforts in this regard and the funding thereof.
Through the chair, Christine Durante from Probation. I can speak to the probation and public safety portion of the grant, and that we use this money for our pretrial services clients to receive electronic monitoring services. I can get data for you as to how many clients we are currently providing service to, if that would be sufficient.
It would. Thank you. And further, the pretrial services, are they exclusively monitoring, or do we offer other pretrial diversion services, et cetera, that we're using this money to fund?
Through the chair, these particular funds only fund the electronic monitoring portion of the pretrial services budget.
Thank you. Do we have anyone from the district attorney's office who can speak to
Go to the chair.
the chair, please?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, no, there's no one here from the district attorney's office.
I would request through the chair that we do have someone here so we can understand how we're doing and what effect this reform to discovery is having on our prosecution efforts. I yield.
Any other discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Item carries. Next item.
Referral 24-0133, scheduling and holding a second public hearing required for the purpose of hearing public comments on Monroe County's current grant funding from the New York State Office of Community Renewal for the Community Development Block Grant CARES Act funding for project number 1705 CVSB 69-22, working capital program totaling $2,970,000.
Moved by Legislator Udelson, seconded by Legislator Baines. Any discussion? Yes, Legislator Smith.
Thank you. Through the chair, why is a second public hearing required for this project?
Through the chair, it's a New York State requirement.
Thank you. I yield the floor.
Legislator Baines?
Through you to the administration, how many people applied for these grants?
Through the chair, we had over 800 applications.
And how many were funded? Through you, Mr. Chairman?
Through the chair, with New York State funding, we funded 119 businesses.
Chair, with, just for our information and through you, Mr. Chairman, in preparation for the hearing to come, what was the key criteria differential between applicants who were funded and applicants who were not funded?
Through the chair, businesses had to provide eligible COVID-related expenses for us to approve their business for funding.
So,
So, I'm sorry, through the chair, they had to show a loss of revenue due to COVID.
they had to show revenue loss through you, Mr. Chairman. So the 780 applicants who were not funded did not provide the proper paperwork?
Through the chair, some of the applicants did not follow through with follow-up requests or provide documentation or respond to requests when we followed up with with them.
So that, through you, Mr. Chairman, so the main purpose of this money is to replace lost revenue for businesses? How, through the chair, how does the, calculate the revenue lost, given the variability of the business climate year over year?
Through the chair, we requested copies of their tax returns and compared it to their current expenses at the time of the application, through the chair.
Garrett, could you clarify that? How did you make that calculation, please?
Through the chair, we requested copies of previous tax returns prior to COVID, as well as their existing or their current expenses at the time of COVID.
So, through you, Mr. Chairman, so we're assuming that the business performed the way it did because of COVID?
Through the chair, yes.
Thank you. I yield the floor.
Thank you, Legislator Baines. I would like to ask a follow-up question on something that Legislator Baines was asking. Were there any applicants who actually fulfilled all the paperwork, compiled everything you needed, who were denied?
Well, I'm sorry, through the chair, they were not denied. They had to show, like I said, they had to show eligible expenses up to $30,000, and if they didn't receive the full allocation.
Okay, I just want to clarify one piece of this. So no one was denied funding if they if they filed all the correct paperwork.
Through the chair, yes.
Thank you very much. Sincerely appreciated. Any other comments? Legislator Brew.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair of the administration, how were the businesses notified of the available funds that would be provided to them through the county?
We posted in the newspaper and used social media to post for the availability of funds, and voted it with the chamber. And
Thank you. And another question through the chair to the administration. What was the start and ending time of which the program would consider the eligibility for funds due to COVID-related losses?
it was from the opening of the application process, which was October of 2022, through the time of their application. Through the chair, we also had to close the application process because the funds were committed and we didn't have enough to fund.
Okay, so a follow-up question. So COVID started, let's say, March 2020, and, you know, it went for a good 2 years. I would, my own personal estimation, as far as affecting our businesses. So my question was, what was the time period that the businesses had to exhibit or had to list as being a loss, start to finish? I think you mentioned that the application time was around 2022.
Through the chair, as long as their business was open prior to March 17th, 2020, they were eligible to apply. And at the time of their application, we went back 6 months of their expenses and verified those expenses.
Okay. So where I'm getting at to the chair of the administration is that there have been residual effects on many businesses since COVID, right? And I was just curious to know if the application for reimbursement of funds to cover the losses were available to cover those residual losses where some of the businesses just found it very difficult to return to the pre-COVID business type of activity. Yes, through the chair of the administration. So I guess there were, in my opinion, that there were businesses that experienced residual losses due to COVID. So from 2020 until what date did the window close for which you could claim losses?
Through the chair, it was from when we reached their application, going back 6 months of expenses, of eligible expenses. Through the chair, the cutoff, there wasn't a cutoff date as far as how far back we would reimburse their funds. It was just we were only covering 6 months' worth of expenses. So whenever we reached their application, some of them didn't get reached until this year, so we went back 6 months of expenses during COVID that they can reimburse, they can apply for reimbursement.
Okay, I yield the floor.
Legislator Baines?
Chairman, what was the maximum award in cash?
Through the chair, they were allowed up to $30,000 of reimbursable expenses.
And through the chair, how does that relate to the scale of the business? In other words, could a business that had a revenue of $32,000 went to 2 and we get 30? Or did we look at the size of the business prior to this? Is that part of our metric?
Through the chair, they had to provide their expenses up to $30,000. So if their expenses, if they didn't have eligible expenses that were eligible through the program, we wouldn't provide them the full grant. It would only be up to whatever they were eligible for. So for instance, we had one business that received $2,000 because that's all they were able to provide as far as eligible expenses for working capital.
The chair, I was here during the prior discussion, and I have no interest in the personal details of these businesses, but it seems to me that understanding the name of the business, owner, location, the nature of the business, I hope that we would have that list and all of the specific awards. I mean, not only so that we can do our due diligence, but also so we even know whether or not we're related to some of the people getting this money. You know, this is a matter of public interest and transparency. So I would hope that we can have as much disclosure as is appropriate without compromising anyone's personal information. I yield the floor.
Any other comments? Yes, Legislator Brew.
Legislator Baines' question through the chair of the administration. So Mr. Baines asked that he had hoped for that information. I'd like to formally request that we do receive that redacted information regarding the business names and the amount of the funds that were awarded.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, just to eliminate any confusion, I thought our answer was quite clear. We are going to provide that. So I'm not sure where Legislator Baines's confusion was with that or anybody else's, but I thought we were quite clear that we are going to provide that information. So just to be clear, thank you.
Thank you. Yield the floor.
Any other discussions? Well, I can say this, I sure hope we don't have another pandemic. Complicated business. So all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 24-0134, scheduling and holding a public hearing required for the submission of Community Development 2024 Annual Action Plan Grant application to the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD.
Move it by Legislator Smith, second by Legislator Dondorfer. Any discussion? Legislator Baines.
Through you to the administration, will we have a detailed list of the submission available to us?
Yes, it's submitted with the May referral, and a draft copy of the action plan will be provided on Thursday.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please by. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 24-0135, acceptance of a grant from the New York State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services for the Operation Stone Garden Program, and authorize intermunicipal agreements with the towns of Greece, Arundecoit, and Webster.
Moved by Legislator Udelson, seconded by Legislator Smith. Any discussion? Legislator Baines.
Would representatives of the Operation Stone Garden program please summarize for the legislature the efficacy of the program and share with us deliverables from the funding in the past?
Through the chair, sir, the program's collaboration between local law enforcement partners as well as our federal partners to investigate instances of drug trafficking, illegal firearms, and human trafficking. The deliverables, if you stand by one moment, I'll pass this over to my colleague. Does that answer the first part of your question, sir?
Thank you. It's the second part that I'm most interested in.
Through the chair.
Through the chair.
Through the chair, Jennifer Curley from the Sheriff's Office. And just to expand on what the Major said, this program's been around for 15 years. And everyone does, I think every state along the border that does not have sufficient border, or has border to an international area, is allowed to get funding. So the deliverables are all reported to Border Patrol, and it's just literally traffic stops, and it's just being out there on the northern border patrolling. They don't have to make arrests, they don't have to write tickets, they're just out there and being seen.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, you don't have any data for the number of drug traffickers who've been interdicted or arrested, or any weapons offenses? I mean, is there data available on the efficacy of this program?
Through the chair, yes, there is data. It's all submitted to Border Patrol through a secured network. I can certainly get that information for you, but it's going to take some time. But I can tell you within the last couple of years, they have not pulled off any weapons, but they have had arrests for drugs.
Chair, thank you. I think that if people understood the program better, there might be more support for it. So because we've discussed it before, and I was satisfied that this program is an effective one, and it is not what people think it is. So any data that you can provide to us through the chair, I would appreciate that, because I think it'll be healthy. I yield the floor.
Any other questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Any opposed? No. Roll call vote.
Roll call vote. Ms. Barnhart. No. Ms. Barnhart votes no. Mr. Baines. Yes. Mr. Baines votes yes. Ms. Bartholomew McCoy. Yes. Ms. Bartholomew McCoy votes yes. Mr. Brew. Yes. Mr. Brew votes yes. Mr. Colby. Yes. Mr. Colby votes yes. Mr. Dondorfer. Yes. Mr. Dondorfer votes yes. Mr. Keller. Yes. Mr. Keller votes yes. Ms. Smith. Yes. Ms. Smith votes yes. Ms. Vasquez Simmons. Ms. Vasquez Simmons votes no. Mr. Udelson. Yes. Mr. Udelson votes yes. Chairman Fucci.
Yes.
Chairman Fucci votes yes. President Rahman. Yes. President Rahman votes yes. 10-2, referral passes.
Thank you. Next item.
Referral 24-0136, acceptance of a grant from the New York State Office of Indigent Legal Services for the offices of the Public Defender, the Conflict Defender, and the Assigned Counsel Program for the second statewide expansion of the Hurl Herring Program.
Moved by Legislator Udelson, seconded by Legislator Baines. Any discussion?
Son-in-law is a senior lawyer in the Department of Public Defender.
Thank you, Legislator Baines. Any other discussion?
Please share what improvements have been made in staffing with this additional funding, or will be made.
Through the chair, the increase in funding is split across the 3 offices, which is why I'm consulting with my colleagues. So if you, through the chair, if you had a specific question with regard to the public defender's office, I
Yeah, so-
could answer that.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman, the notes that I'm reading through state that the assigned counsel program has $865,000 period, but there's an aggregate amount of $865,937, the same amount, so it appears to all be going to the assigned counsel program, so I guess that's where my question needs to go. You, Mr. Chairman, to the assigned counsel, can you share with us what this increase in funding, what effect it will have on the assigned counsel program?
Through the chair, I'm sorry, I don't know the numbers that you're looking at. I don't think the assigned counsel program exclusively has received $800,000 more than we were previously receiving. But I can tell you what we are doing with the funding that we are receiving. We are.
I want to apologize. The notes that I was provided may have misled me on that. However, you have increased, through you, Mr. Chairman, you have increased, your funding has been increased. And I'm asking, how are those dollars going to work for the community?
Through the chair, we are. Through the chair, the assigned counsel program is making a number of changes to how we do things currently. In the past, the assigned counsel program has basically just made assignments at the beginning of a case and paid a voucher at the end of the case. We are implementing a number of programs where there is much more support for our attorneys through the course of their representation of clients. We are providing twice monthly newsletters to our attorneys with case law updates and information about our program. We are offering services such as case conferencing with our attorneys to discuss their cases. We have so far done 6 case conferences. In those 6 cases, 3 have resulted in acquittals for our assigned counsel attorneys' clients. So I believe that program is effective. We also are supporting a second chair program for all cases where a defendant is facing life on the back end. They're entitled to have 2 attorneys to represent them. Those are among the programs that we are using this grant funding for with the assigned counsel program.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 24-0137, authorization to settle a lawsuit in New York State Supreme Court, Monroe County, index number E202000778.
Moved by legislator Udelson, seconded by legislator Baines. I would say any discussion, but we'd have to go into executive session to do that. So I'm just going to move right towards all those in favor, please indicate.
As long as we're not specific to, with all due respect.
Legislator Baines, go for it. Thank
I
you.
would like to explain my vote. This is a $500,000 settlement, and I'm voting yes. We often hear the state of New York criticized chamber, but the law that permits individuals who've been harmed, especially as children, to seek justice has brought cases from many, many years ago, and this is one of them. And after being briefed very well by our excellent legal department, I feel that this is a matter of justice, and I'm voting yes because this is the right thing to do.
Anyone else want to explain their vote? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 24-0138, authorize a grant contract with Starbridge Services pursuant to the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA.
Moved by legislator Udelson, seconded by legislator Baines. Is there any discussion? Seeing none? Oh, legislator Brew.
Chairman, I'd like to rise to explain my vote, if I may.
Yes, go right ahead.
When this proposal first came before the legislature, I must admit the idea of the Neighborhood Collaborative Project was appealing as a Republican. While Republicans like me hesitate to ever give out tranches of taxpayer funds, this new approach seemed appealing. Instead of just throwing cash at an issue, hoping that six, with some organizations who have received funding for years, yet never seem to make any meaningful change, as I said before, this did seem different. This approach was supposed to be by and for the community, not another large multi-million-dollar not-for-profit set up to squander another government handout. In this case, a group of local agencies and individuals who live in the neighborhoods, know the neighborhoods, and the people in them coming together to better their own neighbors and give them access to the resources they need but cannot reach. This is why reports of fraud surrounding this initiative were so disappointing. This was supposed to be a truly meaningful, collaborative project aimed at helping the most vulnerable. Instead, this collaboration became embedded with bad actors who did not share this goal. Instead, they sought to defraud the county and their fellow neighbors for their own personal enrichment. From grand Wagoneers to parties to overpayments to staff and friends, clearly this is unacceptable, and I had hoped that the bad actors would recuse themselves, take accountability, and stay away from this project going forward. Unfortunately, there are those who have wood to stand to profit from these funds who clearly do not intend on doing this. We have had individuals, in some cases leading individuals, receiving money through these contracts who have doubled down. They have posted on Facebook about their unrestricted funding. They have laughed or dismissed valid concerns, and to make matters worse, they have threatened members of this honorable body and members of the public, including on this very floor and on recorded Facebook videos. We will not be intimidated, not today or any day, and we will not jeopardize sending taxpayer dollars to bad actors, immature leaders, or people who flat out disrespect for this honorable body, our county, and our taxpayers. Let me be clear, this is not directed at the entire neighborhood collaborative or the honest people within it who are just trying to help their community. For them, these words and this vote does not reflect upon you or your organization. I truly appreciate those within this structure who have integrity, respect, and have dedicated their time to serving this community. For you, I truly hope that we can find a way to get you the funding that you deserve for this important work that you sought out to provide, and I look forward to seeing this time come in our near future. However, at this time, due to all that has occurred, the ongoing criminal investigations, and the continued inclusion of bad actors who now on a weekly basis give cause for even more concern, I cannot, in good conscience or good stewardship of our taxpayers' dollars, vote to support this in its current form. Therefore, I will be voting no, and I hope to work with this honorable body and the administration to find a way going forward to remove the bad actors, enhance the oversight controls, and get the good actors back on track and onto services that this community needs while protecting our taxpayers. It does not and should not have to be a binary choice between the two, but in this case, in this structure, it is, and I must choose no. Thank you, and I yield the floor.
Legislator Barnhart.
Explain my vote. Administration wants us to believe that by selecting a new fiscal agent, the problem is solved. In fact, we would be voting to continue the problems that led to gross mismanagement. We would be voting to award an entity that has no legal authority under the law, the Neighborhood Collaborative Project, millions of dollars. If it works like the last contract, we would be voting to give this non-entity the ability to control what they treated like a multi-million-dollar slush fund. We would be voting to continue a likely illegal scheme of no-bid contracts to a group of friends and associates. We would be voting to give a disproportionate amount of funding to 3 for-profit businesses who hid the fact that they are LLCs from the county and from the public. They're even listed on the Neighborhood Collaborative Project website on the donate page, along with the nonprofits. And if that's not deception, I don't know what is. And it could have been a deliberate thing to evade procurement. We would be voting to fund a project that is riddled with conflicts of interest among the main subrecipients, none of which were disclosed to this legislature or to the federal government as required. We would be voting to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on research to get back unreadable data. We would be voting to allow vouchers to be submitted for $350 DJs and parties. We would be voting to spend $6 million on a project that claims to transform human service delivery but has almost nothing budgeted to actual human services. We would be voting to allow fraud on vouchers, like claiming someone is a social worker who is not. And we would be voting to award funding to the Father Tracy Advocacy Center, whose executive director has waged a campaign of threats and intimidation against legislators who ask too many questions. She even threatened a legislator right here in these chambers with all of you looking on. Now, why would she do this? I've been asking myself this for a while. Even though she is the executive director, vouchers show she used ARPA funding to pay herself as a vocational trainer, $3,900. How convenient that she and one of her good friends suddenly became vocational trainers when the dollars started rolling in. The other organizations hired actual vocational companies to perform this service. Now it makes sense. She was putting ARPA dollars in her pocket. Her conduct, encouraged by the administration and allies in the legislature and at the highest levels of the Democratic Party, has been so bad she may have broken federal law. None of this is okay. None of this is normal. And you know things are bad when you have to read whistleblower statutes and contact your attorneys before you write your speech explaining your vote. I believe the only reason Starbridge is here, the only reason this proposal is before us, is so the group of people behind the Neighborhood Collaborative Project can continue to pay themselves. They can't access ARPA dollars on their own. This is the setup they came up with to avoid oversight, and the administration either fell for it or actively conspired with them. All of this needs to be investigated, and I suspect it already is. We can and should fund the good work that occurred at nonprofits under the Neighborhood Collaborative Project. We must do so in a legal and ethical manner, and this is not it. I will be voting no.
Any other? Yes, Legislator Vasquez-Simmons.
I was born and raised in the northeast quadrant of the city, a notoriously high crime and drug-plagued community. At the age of 4, while walking with my mother to the grocery store, I witnessed a man get shot to death. As much as my mother attempted to shield me from what had occurred, I could never unsee the lifeless body that laid on the sidewalk. This trauma stayed with me most of my life because there were no crisis resources for families available in my community to help address it. This is the reality for many families living in the inner city of Rochester. In the inner city. For decades, we have heard of million-dollar awards granted to agencies to help address crime, crisis, poverty, addiction, mental health, homelessness, joblessness, and many other of the elements that plague our community. With each press conference, a new agency or group would come in with their own strategy and innovative ways to, quote, save, unquote, the community. Yet time and time again, the millions granted never reached the people directly impacted. The promises of hope were never a reality, and the government failed to provide a necessary follow-up to make certain that dollars were spent as proposed. We have seen nonprofits come and go in this community, and the moment the funding dries up, they pack their bags and leave, never to be seen again. The illustrious caring expressed in their earlier announcements erased forever with no tangible changes ever made or seen. This revolving door continues to perpetuate and exacerbate the long-term harm caused to those already suffering in need. It is the root cause of why poverty has never been solved in Rochester and Monroe County and never will be. Let ours be the generation that changes the system. For the first time in many, many years, we as legislators have an opportunity to stop this vicious cycle, to be intentional, to be impactful, and to truly make a difference in the lives of the people we serve. We can and should fulfill our commitment to provide life-saving and life-changing services directly to the communities that we have failed to reach within our own county-provided services. To do that, we must revisit who and how these services are delivered. The current model has people on the front lines that are both friends and families, individuals not qualified, trained, or licensed by the state of New York to deliver such critical services, and many with existing conflict of interest and ethic concerns. Can and must break the pattern of abuse and do better by our citizens. We took an oath. It's time we upheld it. In the past 6 months, I've been subjected to violence, threats, both physical and verbal. I've been harassed in this very chamber, and to extort me with efforts to influence my vote as well. We all witnessed this in this very room. Is this what the honorable legislative body has been reduced to? For all those reasons that I've stated, and for the good of the people, I humbly and honorably represent the best of my ability. I will be voting no on approval of Starbridge under the current structure disclosed by the administration.
Anyone else? Legislator Baines.
In light of the extremely serious and provocative statements made, I would suggest that the best way to move forward would be to take a pause and answer and investigate some of these issues and resolve them. And so for that reason, I move to table.
We're discussing that. We have a motion to table from Legislator Baines. Is there a second?
Seconded by,
Legislator Bartholomew McCoy. Roll call vote on the motion
I
to
would
table.
assume so, yes.
Roll call vote on the motion to table. Ms. Barnhart? No. Ms. Barnhart votes no. Mr. Baines? Yes. Mr. Baines votes yes. Ms. Bartholomew McCoy? Yes. Ms. Bartholomew McCoy votes yes. Mr. Brew? No. Mr. Brew votes no. Mr. Colby? No. Mr. Colby votes no. Mr. Dondorfer? No. Mr. Dondorfer votes no. Mr. Keller? No. Mr. Keller votes no. Ms. Smith? Ms. Smith votes no. Ms. Vasquez Simmons? No. Ms. Vasquez Simmons votes no. Mr. Udelson? No. Mr. Udelson votes no. Chairman Mufucci?
No.
Chairman Mufucci votes no. President Roman? President Roman votes yes. 3-9. Motion to table fails.
Okay, back to the original motion. All those in favor, please indicate by saying, well, we got to go roll call. Roll call.
Or to the parliamentarian. If this committee has a negative vote, when will this matter be able to be reintroduced?
Testing. Okay. Sorry. It can be brought up again at the full legislature with a vote of the majority. It's a possibility. Otherwise, it cannot come forth in this cycle. As with Starbridge, it could come forward with another entity, another form. If that makes sense.
Okay, just to reflectively listen to you, Mr. Parliamentarian, it would take 15 votes to discharge it from this committee and bring it before the full legislature? Is that what I'm hearing?
Power of the president, yes.
All right, thank you.
So roll call vote?
Roll call vote. Ms. Barnhart? No. Ms. Barnhart votes no. Mr. Baines? Mr. Baines votes yes. Ms. Bartholomew McCoy? Ms. Bartholomew McCoy votes yes. Mr. Brew? Mr. Brew votes no. Mr. Colby? Mr. Colby votes no. Mr. Dondorfer? Mr. Dondorfer votes no. Mr. Keller? Mr. Keller votes no. Ms. Smith? Ms. Smith votes no. Ms. Vasquez Simmons? Ms. Vasquez Simmons votes no. Mr. Udelson? Mr. Udelson votes yes. Chairman Mufucci?
Yes.
Chairman Fucci votes yes. President Roman? President Roman votes yes. 5-7, referral fails. Referral 24-0143, authorize the sale of county-owned surplus real property at the March 2024 public auction.
Moved by Legislator Udelson, seconded by Legislator Baines. Any discussion? Legislator
Thank you. Through the chair, I know that typically these sale prices are negotiated by real property, but could you explain how these sale prices were determined?
Through the chair, it was an auction. The highest bidder won the property through the auction. So there was no set price.
Through the chair, just as a follow-up question, I understand how auctions work. Do we ever look at what the assessed value is of the home and see what we're taking for it at auction, or?
Through the chair, it's controlled by statute.
Thank you.
Legislator Colby.
So if I can understand this correctly, is this through the chair, is this an absolute auction when it was auctioned, or is this absolute auction was done based on contingencies of approval by us or by a certain dollar value that's acceptable?
Through the chair's approval by you.
Okay, through you, Chairman, the second question was, any of the properties when they're auctioned were not approved, were not brought forward to us because the value was lower than you thought was appropriate?
Through the chair, I don't understand the question. Do you ask about the sale price of the properties?
In a lot of land auctions, there is times when the seller can not accept the auction price.
Yes, we do have a reserve.
So it's a reserve auction?
Yes, it is a reserve.
It's not an absolute auction?
No.
Who was the one that determined if the auction price was appropriate?
Through the chair.
Through the chair.
Through the chair, it is done by the director and a real property specialist. They appraise the property and they review how much needs to meet the reserve before we set the opening bidding price.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Legislator Smith.
Thank you. Through the chair to the administration. You said you set a price. Is that something that can be shared with us to see what the set price is and then what it actually went for?
Yes, the auction opening, through the chair, the auctioning opening bid was posted on the Monroe County website.
Okay.
All the bids, the opening bids are still available on the website, what the opening starting price was for each property.
Thank you so much.
Anyone else like to speak? Thank you. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Are there any other matters to come before this committee? There being no other matters, the April 30th, 2024 meeting of the Ways and Means Committee stands adjourned. The next meeting of the Ways and Means Committee will be Tuesday, May 21st.